Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the live Q&A with me, Professor Michael Scott. It is the 8th of September. Where does time fly? The summer has definitely left us here in the UK. I stand surrounded by pouring rain. Thankfully, I'm inside, as you can probably guess, as ever, with the wonderful clock behind me, lit up to bring a little bit of light to this dark, rainy afternoon. I hope you guys are all well. And thank you, as ever, for your fantastic questions that you've been sending in about the ancient world, which it is our joy to delve into for the next half an hour and marvel at the perils, weirdness, wonderfulness, and eccentricity of everything that is ancient. Good afternoon, Sarah. Good afternoon, Anne. Thank you all so much indeed for joining in. Now, I promised we have to absolutely start this time with a question that I have been promising to answer for a couple of Q&As, and I apologise once again for not getting around to it in the last ones, that came in from Linda Montague. And this was the question. She'd like to ask about Rome's conversion to Christianity and how it affected the relationship with the peoples of the different regions of the Roman Empire. Did they have a better relationship than when they were all so-called pagans? So there's two kind of parts to this question. I was reading it and then rereading it and thinking about it again. And initially, I thought it was a question talking about kind of how did Christianity kind of work within the Roman Empire and how did it then change the subsequent history of the Roman Empire? But then thinking also about kind of, did it help constituent parts of the Roman Empire interact with one another in a better way, which I think, Linda, is what you're also kind of asking about. Good afternoon, Carol from Swansea. Good afternoon, Michael. Hello, Lorraine. Hello, Kath. Hello, Shelley. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much indeed for tuning in. So we're talking about the Roman Empire and Rome's conversion to Christianity. Did it help the different regions actually get on better with one another? Now, there's an extent to which did the regions have to actually get on better with one another? They were all administered by the centre. Rome was a very, very efficient and clever bureaucracy that managed with relatively light touch administration and certainly light touch force to keep most of its empire in check and functioning neatly and independently. And this they did in part by saying, right, only the stuff that we really need to go Roman goes Roman. Everything else stays local. You guys do it better than we do. As long as you're paying your taxes, the soldiers won't turn up. And then, of course, they would make sure that legions that were stationed in different parts of the Roman Empire weren't from that part of the Roman Empire. So a legion would be composed of soldiers coming from somewhere entirely different, so that they didn't have any ties to their local area and were there very much on behalf of Rome. What we see with Christianity, and what I think perhaps Linda's question is getting to, is there then a sort of conformity of religious worship that enables them all to sort of relate to one another better? And the answer there very much is no. Hello, Rosie. Hello, Emma. Hello, Jodie. Hello, Phil. Hello, Alexi. Thank you so much indeed all for tuning in. Absolutely not. Because Christianity in its early form, in the early centuries, and even through to post-Rome's conversion of Christianity, which, of course, Roman Empire didn't convert to Christianity until the 4th century AD, even then, actually, Christianity was very, very varied in its practice. And it was indeed, as we kind of know, some of the Roman emperors who led that gradual process of official conversion towards Christianity. It was the interactions of the Roman emperors that actually helped to solve and settle and sort quite a few of the disparities in the way things were being done, thought about, worshipped and believed in early Christianity in different parts of the empire. So we're thinking about, for instance, the development of the Nicene Creed from the Council of Nicaea that was developed to settle things like when is Easter, etc. But even after that, you get variations in practice. And in fact, one of my favourite sayings, when in Rome, do as the Romans do, comes from this period of early variety in Christian practice around the Roman Empire. Because when in Rome, do as the Romans do, is a phrase that occurred when a Roman citizen from the north coast of Africa, so actually coming from the area where Carthage had once been the great power, who was a Christian, had gone to Rome and found that Christianity was being practiced in a very, very different way in Rome to the way that they had been practicing it in North Africa at Carthage. When they went back to Carthage, they asked the Christian bishop in Carthage what to make of this variety of practice. And his response was, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. So we could take from that actually people were getting on a little better and just sort of agreeing with, engaging with this variety, and kind of getting on with it as a result and dealing with it. But we also know, of course, that in the first decades, and more, right, kind of across the first centuries of the development of Christianity within the Roman Empire, and even after the official conversion of Roman Empire to Christianity, there is also a lot of pushback. So we had initially, obviously, the persecutions of Christianity, and then post the adoption of Christianity, there is kind of quite well documented destruction by early Christian communities of pagan communities. So actually, there is a lot of tension still there going on as well. What we can't do, Linda, that's the last part of the answer to this question, is take that forward and see how kind of that conformity slowly kicks in over time and helps the Roman Empire as we know it to develop a conformity perhaps more than it had as when it was a pagan empire, because actually relatively quickly after Rome's conversion to Christianity, and its official conversion happens in 390 under the Roman Emperor Theodosius, we start to see actually the fall of the Roman Empire as we know it, and we start to see that it kind of splits into what we will know as the Eastern Roman Empire that will become the Byzantine Empire, and the Western Roman Empire that will fall apart. So by 410, right, just 20 years after Rome's official conversion in 390, the Visigoths are invading Rome, and by 402, actually the official capital of the Western Roman Empire is no longer Rome in the first place. It's actually Ravenna, that will eventually fall in 476 when it's captured by the Herulians, and at that point the last Western Roman emperor will be removed from power, and we will have the fall of the Western Roman Empire. So there's quite a fast decline for the Western Roman world after Rome's conversion to Christianity. Of course, the Eastern Roman Empire will carry on in the form of Byzantium. So, Linda, thank you so much for your question. Lauren, lovely to see you. Lovely to see you all. Thank you so much indeed for tuning in. It's great that you could be here for the question. So thank you, Linda, for your question about Rome's conversion to Christianity and its impact on how the different constituent parts of the Roman world got on with one another and with then kind of survived going forward. We can move very, very quickly to another great question that's come in from Ash Armstrong. So Ash is asking about how did kind of plays that we have come down to us, and presumably we're talking about here the ancient Greek tragedies and comedies, the great stuff. Hello, Patricia. What's that symbol, Patricia, that you've put on the thing? I can't follow that at all. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. The how have the plays come down to us? Is it mainly via Byzantine scribes and copyists? Were copies more widely distributed than that, though? How recently was the most recent complete play rediscovered? How likely is it that more can be found in the future, and where? Ash, you are asking lots and lots of good questions. Absolutely fantastic stuff. And again, the answers are a little more complicated than we might otherwise expect them to be. So I think the initial image that we have in our heads, isn't it, of how these things have come down to us, how these great not just the ancient Greek tragedies and comedies, but more widely the wider corpus of ancient literature. How have this stuff come down to us? It's been through that image of that monk sitting there in those monasteries, scribing away. No worries, Patricia. It's a really cool little symbol. Kind of those scribing away and copying. But actually, that's not kind of very much necessarily the only route, and or by far in some certain cases the most important route. One of the ways in which stuff is immediately being kind of transcribed out is that it's being translated out of particularly the Greek and into the world of what we as Asia Minor, modern day Turkey and the Levant, and North Africa, into Syriac, into Arabic, into Persian. And then that material kind of is at different later points in time coming back into and then being retranslated back into Greek, to Latin, and to other languages. So that's one particular route that stuff has survived to us. Otherwise, the Eastern Roman Empire around Byzantium, Constantinople, kind of modern day Istanbul, obviously that's another route because that empire continues, doesn't it, as the Byzantine Empire through to 1453 and the fall of Byzantium to the Ottoman Empire. Though there is a continuation of scholarship reading in the Greek and copying of the Greek and studying the Greek. And when Byzantium falls, Constantinople falls, 1453, you have a number of those scholars that then flee westwards and become part of, from post 1453, part of the European world once again, and bringing those direct copies with them. So you have sort of two routes into, if you like, the Western European world in the later Middle Ages and onwards, bringing these scriptures, these texts kind of together, which are then being translated out of different languages into Latin and onwards. And then, of course, you have some of the most fascinating ways in which stuff is being rediscovered, which is because we're digging up the surviving manuscripts as we go. Now, this happens particularly in places like Egypt, where the nice dry conditions of the desert sand help maintain and allow stuff to survive. And there has been a continual process of discovery. So, for instance, one of my favourite texts thinking about ancient Athenian democracy, Aristotle's Constitution of the Athenians, was dug out of the sand in Fiume in 1879, 1889. When it was discovered as an entirely brand new text. Wasn't any part of the corpus of Aristotle's work up to that point in time, but we found an original copy sitting there in the desert. And then, of course, the most famous kind of cache of documents coming out of the Egyptian desert are the Oxyrhynchi papyri. The Oxyrhynchus papyri, of which there are thousands and thousands and thousands of small shreds of papyri coming out of effectively an Egyptian rubbish dump that we can now slowly start to read and look at. This is a difficult process sometimes. Not only is it the sheer volume, but actually it was a rubbish dump. So often these scrolls and scripts, even though they've survived, are not in very good condition. So we need really good digital skill sets and technologies to enable us to read as much as we possibly can. And that can be through special infrared light, for instance, as well as kind of special scanning techniques that allow us to read that material. We also get another kind of set of technologies that allow us to read a number of the manuscripts that were kind of taken by the monks. They weren't copying them out, they were actually scrubbing them out and then writing their stuff on top of them. But we can still actually read the stuff that was scrubbed out. So we can actually get at that sort of material as well using some of the latest technologies. And some of you may have been aware of what they did recently with the burnt papyrus surviving from Herculaneum that has been known about for a long time, but it's been absolutely too fragile to touch, and they haven't been able to unroll it, haven't been able to look at it for fear of destroying it. Finally now, actually as a rolled up burnt set of papyrus, using special infrared scanning technologies, they've actually been able to read the material that's written on these texts. So kind of there are amazing discoveries still to be made and are being made every single day as our technology gets better to read the stuff that we have, as we find more stuff that's coming out of the ground, as well as that bulk of material that's come to us through those different routes across time and space. So Ash, thank you so much indeed for your fabulous question. Now, how are you all and what are you getting up to in and about the ancient world? It's time for us to take a bit of a quick break and think about the ancient world that's been in the news. Kind of some of my favourites that we've been flagging on the Facebook page, and which I hope you've been enjoying as well. The M5 dig, so the first hours of a community archaeology dig off the M5 in Worcestershire. Volunteers gave up their time during the summer holidays, and in the first hours of a dig, don't we all kind of wish this would be us when we were on a community archaeology dig that we just agreed to do over the summer holidays? In the first hours, we unearthed hidden treasures in Norton near Evesham. So project leads were delighted to announce that kind of on day one of the dig, pottery dating back 2,000 years amongst the other findings. That's the kind of thing, isn't it, that you sort of really hope for kind of in every dig that you go into. Lots more amazing stuff that has been found out and about, but one of my particular favourites, have you noticed that NASA's latest mission to the moon, we won't go into some of the sort of different issues that has been happening, obviously, of course, with NASA and their technological different difficulties lately, but they have named their latest mission to the moon Artemis. Now, kind of thinking about why they've decided to name Artemis, obviously there's a connection with the moon itself as ancient lunar goddess, but kind of Artemis because of her sort of strong kind of feminist streak as well, kind of this is NASA moving into the 21st century, not the Apollo missions, but the Artemis missions. And I was involved with this from a slightly different standpoint in that many of you will know, I'm a big fan of Delphi and have been involved for quite some time with one of the forums that gathers at Delphi, which is trying to think about how actually in the modern world in the 21st century we can take some of the inspiration from ancient Delphi and turn it into a modern world approach. And that group have also simultaneously been thinking about how they can link the work of Delphi, a sanctuary of Apollo, with that other great sanctuary of Apollo on Delos, which was both a sanctuary to Apollo and to Artemis. And in fact, over the summer, they had a sort of a signature event on the island of Delos that was there to celebrate the Artemis NASA kind of moon project. So there they were. I can just imagine these fantastically scientific and technologically minded NASA officials arriving on their boat to the island of Delos and kind of taking part in a great ceremony amongst the ruins of the sanctuary of Artemis and Apollo. I think that would be absolutely brilliant. I suspect in some ways the look on their faces might have been similar to when we at the University of Warwick were building our new Faculty of Arts building, which of course now brand new, open, shiny, fabulous. But when we had the groundbreaking ceremony several years ago, we were asked whether the Department of Classics and Ancient History could provide a little something special for the groundbreaking ceremony. And so we did. We provided a group of students led by our Warwick Classics Network fellow Dr. Paul Grigsby, who were all there to pour libations to the ancient Greek chthonic deities and Olympian deities to ensure that they were on side and happy with the building of our building. And as a result, when you went to the groundbreaking ceremony, what you saw was a bunch of very kind of hardened building construction workers who had seen it all, done it all on building sites around the world, but perhaps had never seen a groundbreaking ceremony quite like this, where people dressed in togas with then high-vis jackets and hard hats over the top, safety first, of course, were sitting there with replica ancient Greek drinking cups, kalikes, and pouring libations of milk, honey, and wine into the ground to secure the pagan gods' support for our building project. So I have a feeling that perhaps the NASA officials were looking a little bit like that, just like the construction workers did at our own groundbreaking ceremony. That's what I've got in my head anyway. Another thing to flag from The Observer, of course, we've got Stone Blind coming out by Natalie Haynes, new book coming out very soon with a review here, a gripping Gorgon retelling. The writer and classicist's rollicking fourth novel, a reframing of the myth of Perseus and Medusa, questions our perceptions of monsters and heroes. So if you haven't already ordered your copy, you must order your copy immediately and tell us what you think about it. And then, of course, we've got The Guardian newspaper, just from yesterday, as with many newspapers and websites around the world, that were asking once again, what is Boris Johnson talking about? In particular, with his reference in his resignation speech to Cincinnatus, the Roman dictator. Yes. Now, there were calls coming in yesterday, left, right, and centre, saying, "Would you come and talk about kind of who this person is and what is Boris Johnson doing once again?" And so I thought I'd save it for you here, as we can now reflect with a tiny bit of distance as to what was going on. So, who was this guy? Okay, so we have got Lucius Quintus Cincinnatus, who was a Roman, rich, elite, very much elite Roman. And he was born way back in the time of the early Roman Republic. So born around about 519 BCE. And he's from a very rich family, rises up to be a kind of senior elite politician, senator, etc., involved in the kind of, top level of Roman politics. But in about the 460s BCE, the Roman Republic really runs into trouble. There are initial tensions in how the political system is going to work and how the desires of the plebeians, the great masses of the Roman people, who certainly aren't the patricians, the elites, are going to be met and recognised. And particularly this is sort of centering around a desire for a codification of the laws, a kind of early sort of version of a Roman Republican constitution. Actually, this leads to outright kind of battle, if you like, and kind of there's sort of real kind of problems going in, and the consuls, the kind of people in charge of the Roman Republic for a particular year, are actually put out of action. Cincinnatus gets brought in to be a consul for that period of time. He's not at all a big fan of what the plebeians want of these kind of codified laws and constitutions. Other members of his family are outright killing plebeians and then being killed in return for it. So it's not a particularly pretty picture, and you may be wondering why at all Boris Johnson wanted to have a reference to this guy in his resignation speech. But supposedly, when Cincinnatus finishes his term as consul, he then quits the city and goes off to live on his farm out in the countryside, and kind of withdraws from politics. Then, in 458, so just a couple of years later, he's called back because Rome suddenly fears for its survival. It's being attacked from different directions. It's in utter upheaval. And in these situations, Rome's consuls and the Senate can decide that they need to appoint a sole person in charge, a dictator. Now, obviously, Rome doesn't like to do this because it's had a history of having kings, didn't really like them, chucked them out, developed the Republic, but on occasion it will allow power to pass to a dictator. And supposedly, they went out to Cincinnatus' farm, they found him ploughing, they asked him to put his toga on and come back and be dictator and save the city. He did so. He had total power in Rome for 15 days to sort the problem, see off the immediate attack, the issue, and then happily just handed back all that power to the Roman Republic and went back to his farm again. And supposedly in some of the sources, about 2 decades later, he was called back again to be dictator because Rome was in trouble once again, and this time held on to power for 21 days and then happily let it go and moved back to his farm once more. So, what was Boris Johnson trying to say by comparing himself to dear old Cincinnatus? The commentators have gone rife thinking, well, is this somebody who's willing to come back in the future if people were to come and find him at his plough? Although the idea of seeing Boris Johnson at his plough is a little bit of a weird one. And don't forget, obviously, in the bigger story of Cincinnatus as an individual, this is no fan of the people. This is a very, very elite patrician. Oh, yeah, you can see some of the similarities, can't you? Who actually resisted most of the calls for increased plebeian power, but seems to have happily carried out the role of dictator for 2 periods of history. So I'm not quite sure that Boris kind of really wants us to go into the detail of this kind of association. I'm pretty sure we're not going to be inviting him back as dictator for any period of time. At least I hope not. But kind of clearly he has some desire to have not yet finished his political career. And I'm sure he will kind of do a photo op with a plough if at some point he does come back in the future. So I will say no more about that, but absolutely brilliant. You're keeping an eye on all the classics, all the ancient world in the news everywhere we go. What's on? Don't forget, at the moment, if you are in the USA and Canada, my Who Were the Greeks series is back on BBC Select. And you can have a look at that. There's been lots of replaying of the ancient invisible cities. Thank you so much for your kind comments that have been coming in, and also for the Sicily series that was back on over the summer. If you are interested in supporting Classics for All, absolutely fantastic charity that works to really, really get classics, the teaching of classics, back into state schools around the country in the UK, and it's now just celebrated its 10th anniversary, and disclaimer, I am a trustee of Classics for All, so I am absolutely biased, then they are doing a Hadrian's Wall virtual walk to raise money. So we're challenging, Classics for All are challenging you to walk the equivalent distance of Hadrian's Wall, 84 miles, over the month of September to raise money for the work and their work, great work in state schools. Now, this is obviously tying in with the 1900th anniversary of Hadrian's Wall this year. You can boost your fitness, get in your daily exercise. Kind of all you need to do to complete 84 miles during the month of September is as little as 2.8 miles or 5,600 steps per day. That's nothing. Get on with it. We can do it while we do this Q&A. We could all do it walking. And you'd be raising fantastic money for a fantastic cause as well. So do think about getting involved with that. Then we've also got a great film of the week from Hay Festival player is Stephen Fry, talking about the importance of homecomings and the Odysseus. Eliza says, I walked Hadrian's Wall for real for your honeymoon. Brilliant, absolutely fantastic. Was that a joint choice, or did you sort of have to exert a little bit of pressure to make that your honeymoon? Where did you stay? Did you have drinks on the wall and celebrate at different points of the day? What was your favourite bit? Eliza, tell us all. Let us know over the Facebook page or on email, and we can showcase some of your best bits of Hadrian's Wall next time we're on the Q&A. History Hit podcast, there's a great new episode, really interesting, about prosthetics in antiquity, in which Tristan Hunt is joined by Dr. Drain Draycott from the University of Glasgow. Definitely worth a listen. Natalie Haynes has also been on Radio 4, of course, with her Homer's Odyssey, as well as her stand-up for the classics on Lucretius. And there have been lots of great blogs that have been coming out recently as well. So we've got all of these flagged up on our Facebook page. Do go and have a look at them. Have we got time for one more question? I think we have. We can perhaps, can we do a couple here? Penny Locke got in touch asking about the Ancient Invisible Cities programme for Istanbul, asking about the system that was used in the mosque for filtering the soot from the candles up into one room where it could be collected and used for ink for writing. And do I know of any other places where this system was used in a building? No, I do not know of any other places, Penny, where this was used. It is, as you say, really quite ingenious and shows the sort of brilliant advances in simple but good architectural technology that were employed kind of in the building of the great mosques of Istanbul. So kind of if other people do know of any other examples, please, again, do let us know through the Facebook page or over email or now live on the chat if you can. Mike Robbins was watching The First War for Western Civilization. Wow, that's a series that takes me back. And obviously talking about their love of the Battle of Marathon, you are hoping to be able to do an ancient battle tour of Greece and kind of asking for recommendations. Now, I think it's made that some battle history and military history has been out of vogue in the study of ancient Greek history for quite some time, because it was in vogue for a long time and it became a bit sort of kind of old and staid, sort of thinking about battle maneuvers, etc. But I think actually there's quite a lot that can be gained by going back to the battle sites of the key battles that defined the direction of Greek history, putting yourselves in those locations, and particularly seeing quite a number of the memorials that were erected in antiquity to those battles, which are still standing there. And very often they're in quite sort of out the way, remote locations that kind of you can get right up close to them. There isn't the kind of, stand back, don't touch this, don't go anywhere near this. So if, Mike, you were to go and do kind of a top 10, obviously Marathon, battlefield of Marathon, definitely well visiting. You can't run up and down the Marathon mound supposedly containing the bodies of the 192 Athenian dead, but you can walk around the battlefield and see the very different fantastic aspects of the site, and it's been brilliantly orchestrated as a proper archaeological site for you to visit. So that's a definite one. Thermopylae, I also think, is still worth visiting because it just shows you how difficult it is sometimes to get your head around how much terrain has changed between the ancient and the modern worlds.